Question 21. Driver. My friends say I will one day have an accident because I drive my sports car recklessly. But I have done some research, and apparently minivans and larger sedans have very low accident rates compared to sports cars. So trading my sports car in for a minivan would lower my risk of having an accident. Alright, so argument or set of facts, and clearly we have an argument here. The conclusion of this driver is that trading my sports car in for a minivan would lower my risk of having an accident. And how do we know that? Well, he's done some research, and minivans and larger sedans have very low accident rates compared to sports cars. So minivans and larger sedans have lower accident rates when compared to sports cars. And you notice that is a correlation. The driver takes that correlation, right? The minivans and larger sedans having lower accident rates, two things occurring together, and turns it into a cause and effect argument in his conclusion, because when he says trading my sports car in for a minivan would lower my risk of having an accident, he's assuming that the minivan is the cause of the lower accident rate. And clearly this is flawed logic, because obviously if he still drives like Speed Racer and thinks he's Mario Andretti, he's still going to get into an accident, right? So here he takes a correlation that minivans have lower accident rates, turns it into a cause and effect argument by saying in his conclusion that trading his sports car in for a minivan would lower his risk of having an accident. Clearly this is a flawed argument. Taking correlation for cause and effect, so looking at the question stem, the reasoning in the driver's argument is most vulnerable to criticism on the grounds that this argument, again, most vulnerable to criticism. We have another errors of reasoning question. So looking for an answer choice that explains this flaw of mistaking a correlation for cause and effect, we go to A, infers a cause from a mere correlation. Clearly that is the flaw, so A would be the correct answer. But again, just making sure, B relies on a sample that is too narrow. Again, not the problem here. We do not have a sample that's too narrow. Right? B explaining the flaw of overgeneralization from an unrepresentative sample. But again, not what we saw here. C misinterprets evidence that a result is likely as evidence that a result is certain. Again, the flaw of taking something that is probable and assuming that it will happen for sure, not the flaw that we see in this passage. Again, he said that it would lower his risk of an accident, not that he would never have an accident. So C is out. D, mistaking a condition sufficient for bringing about a result for a condition necessary for doing so. So mistaking sufficient for necessary, right? We know sufficient guarantees necessary. Having necessary doesn't tell us anything about whether we have the sufficient condition. Remember, don't just reverse. Right, if all carrots are vegetables, just because I have a vegetable doesn't necessarily mean it's a carrot, and that is the flaw D is describing, but not what we saw. Moving to E, relies on a source that is probably not well informed. Again, clearly not what we saw in our passage, so E would be eliminated.